We don't ask, where was it made?
Yeah, you're
We
right.
don't ask the question, who made it? Where was it made? How is it made? Is it certified? Who looked at it? We don't ask these questions. We just simply buy it. And
Yeah.
we actually swallow it.
No,
Robert Freed is our guest today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the
welcome.
invitation.
We're very excited to meet with you and hear about really why you went into this field after being in Hollywood for as long as, you're a local, you live in Los Angeles.
I'll let you take it from here.
Well, in the 90s, I was working on an internet e-commerce service providing company and obviously producing some films. And I met an entrepreneur of another company who shared investors who was doing stem cell research. And he was working on something called telomeres, which are little fragments of protein attached to chromosomes of cells. And every time the cell divides, telomere shrinks a little bit. And when it shrinks down to becoming a stub, the cell itself becomes senescent, basically non-functional, and aged. It ages out and dies. And they had identified an enzyme, which they called telomerase, which they felt when you put a telomerase into a cell, even despite the fact that the cell would continue to divide, the telomere would no longer shrink. So they made the cell immortal. And I thought that was pretty cool. And at the time, I was in my 30s and wanted to stay in my 30s. So
Of course.
I became obsessed with the idea of, is there science that could actually impact the way the body ages? So it was a personal passion, and I endeavored to meet all the leading scientists that I could that were working on longevity in the late 90s and through the 2000s, including these telomere stem cell scientists. The telomere research sort of pivoted into this thing called sirtuins. Remember there was like a big red wine craze?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So in the 1930s, there was a study published actually out of Cornell that showed that when a body eats, it has very, very restricted calorie intake, it ages slower. And the Darwinian thesis behind that is when there's no available calories. In the early days of species survival, when calories were not readily available, the body would adapt because there are no calories available and would age longer to survive. Well, the thesis was that it activated a series of genes called sirtuin genes. So they tried to mimic caloric restriction. And Sinclair and some other scientists claimed that they had found a molecule that mimicked caloric restriction in the skin of red grapes called resveratrol. And it got extremely hyped. And he did all kinds of press and wrote about it and was on national TV saying resveratrol mimics caloric restriction. If you take resveratrol, it'll slow down aging. It then yielded this red wine craze. It turned out not to be true.
We remember this craze. And, even in his recent book, he still talks about that, but says that there's more research that needs to be done. Since then, that has been debunked.
It's not even crystal clear that sirtuins are involved in longevity, actually. That hasn't been proven either. But in the interim, he formed a biotech company and sold it for $700 million on that story. But that was something that got me interested. I further looked into the research and met many of those scientists working on resveratrol. And it clearly didn't work. The question was, why didn't it work? And one of the theories was it didn't work perhaps because it requires a great deal of something called NAD to activate sirtuin or any genes.
We're going to go into the importance of NAD. I think the idea for all our viewers and listeners is that NAD ultimately is essentially a coenzyme that will allow for the creation of ATP, which is energy. And so, but why is it important?
So NAD is involved in all metabolic functions, not just energy production. I mean, people understand that the body produces energy. Not many people understand that it's created inside the cell. And the main way that energy is created are through these organelles called mitochondria. And there's a process called the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle where the mitochondria take the nutrients from the food that we eat and the oxygen from the air we breathe and put it through this cycle. And the yield at the end is this thing called energy, which is transferred through the rest of the cell through these molecules called adenosine triphosphate, ATP. But NAD involved in every step of the way in converting those nutrients and oxygen into energy. So NAD is important, but NAD is also involved in other metabolic processes, like the repair of the cell.
Definitely.
So, for example, if there's some sort of gene break or gene mutation, or there's the presence of a virus, or there's some actual physical damage, or even sometimes a cell is so sick that it kills itself. All of these things are involved in NAD. So NAD is a coenzyme that works with other enzymes to do these functions, but there's a reservoir of NAD inside the cell. And when the cell is very stressed, like being old, that reservoir is depleted. So we have less ability to perform those metabolic functions like energy metabolism or like repairing the cell.
And for the listeners and viewers, just to put it in perspective, let's say after the age of 30, what type of percent decline of NAD will we see in the body by the time you're 70?
The answer to that question is depends where you're looking. So if you're looking in the blood, in blood cells, you'll get one answer. But if you're looking in tissue cells like kidney or heart or brain, you get a different answer. And it depends on which tissue you're looking at. Generally accepted thinking is between the time you're in your mid-20s to your 40s, it's cut in half. And from 40s to 60s, it's cut in half yet again.
So I want everybody to let that sink in. That is a significant percent reduction. Rob, listen, it's because they have an increase in mitochondria, and these are tissues that the body ultimately needs more than some of the others. And so you're stacked full of these little powerhouse machines. And I think, there's been this prevailing theory of inflammation that ultimately leads to everything from aging to cancers to, disease and things like that. And I know that ChromaDex has been researching. Let's talk a little bit about inflammation and what this ultimately leads to. What do we know from a scientific standpoint?
Well, we understand that inflammation in the short term is actually beneficial. So if there's an injury, this is the body trying to correct whatever that injury is or that disease or that virus is. Where we get to a problem is if the inflammation doesn't dissolve, if it becomes chronic inflammation.
Definitely.
If we're 20 years old and we're playing basketball and we twist the knee, you get a swollen knee and 2 weeks later you're playing basketball again.
True.
Oh, I miss those days.
But when you're 60 and you're playing basketball and you twist the knee, it could be arthritis, could lead to arthritis if the inflammation doesn't go away. What's arthritis? It's basically chronic inflammation in the joints. And the same is true with skin. If you go out and you are exposed to the sun when you're a kid, you get a sunburn and a couple of weeks later you're back in the sun. But when you're older, that could lead to a significant problem, even a single major exposure to the sun. This is the diminished ability to repair. For the cell's diminished ability to repair. The World Health Organization defines aging as the accumulation of damage at the molecular and cellular level and the diminished ability to repair that damage. So really, we all know, all of us that are aging know that what aging is damage, whether it's a skin cell or some other tissue or organ, it's just getting damaged. It's getting damaged. We can see the damage or we could feel the damage, but we have the diminished ability to repair that damage. And repairing the damage inside the cell is all about NAD.
Yes. For those of us who've been researching aging, and that it's not a single silver bullet, but it is a very important aspect to aging. So, that's when ChromaDex, really acquired Tru Niagen. It's through a different healthcare company. And so, which was amazing because you had some top researchers. And Tru Niagen, for a lack of a better description, is probably one of the leading industry standards for NAD supplementation. Kind of bring us through your thought process. I know obviously you realize the importance of NAD and repair, cellular repair. And obviously we want that mitochondrial boost. What was the thought process going into this? Where are you at now? And then we can talk about some of the specifics.
Well, I don't think Tru Niagen and ChromaDex are one of the leading NAD companies. I don't think there is a number two.
Yeah, they're the leading, definitely.
Our scientific advisory board is a collection of researchers and scientists that work specifically on NAD and energy metabolism and mitochondria. The inventor of the ingredient nicotinamide riboside is Dr. Charlie Brenner. He's at the City of Hope. He invented it when he was at Dartmouth. But we have two other Nobel Prize winners, Roger Kornberg from Stanford in chemistry, Sir John Walker at Cambridge, who won his Nobel Prize in mitochondrial research. Also, Rudy Tanzi, the co-head of neurology at Harvard. I mean, and it's on and on. And all these people are doing studies. The leading cancer research, Dr. Bruni Felding at Scripps Research Institute. These people are very excited about the fact that Tru Niagen very, very, very safely elevates NAD in distressed cells.
Mm-hmm.
So that concept is exciting to researchers. It's not so much that elevating NAD will cure any specific disease, but it'll help the cell cure itself. That's a great idea, and it's very on trend in a lot of medical research presently, like cancer, for example. This idea that the body will heal itself. So how can I help the body to heal itself?
Definitely. That's why immune therapy is such a large portion now of cancer therapies, because we are now realizing all these toxic, chemotherapeutic agents that we've been giving people, they're broadband as opposed to sniper. And we realize that our body has the capability. So now looking at natural killer cells and CAR T cell therapy and things like that, we're slowly isolating and targeting specific cancer antigens based off of your own immune system. So agreed.
ChromaDex as a company is basically an R&D company, and it developed this molecule with Dr. Brenner at Dartmouth. And it's interesting, when you're a company that develops ingredients like this, if you get a phone call from a research institution like a university, they say, we understand you have this ingredient. Do you mind if we, at our expense, study your ingredient at our expense to see if it has some therapeutic or prophylactic value for some disease state? If you get that call, that's a good call.
Definitely.
You may, at your expense, prove that it really works for something and really increase sales of that ingredient. And if you get 5 or 10 of those calls, you have a blockbuster ingredient.
Mm-hmm.
Well, ChromaDex has now had nicotinamide riboside, or what we call Niagen, for 10 years. And we recently signed our 300th research agreement.
Wow.
It's amazing.
With the leading research institutions in the world, because it's a very exciting idea. And initially, those studies were about, does Tru Niagen elevate NAD? And is it safe? The early studies were pretty much that. And that was pretty much established as science.
Sure.
It elevates NAD in humans and in animals, and it does it safely. And it does it not just in blood, but in the brain, in the heart, in the liver, in the skin, in the tissues. But then it started moving into disease states. So today we have 30 published clinical, human, peer-reviewed, controlled studies that have been published.
Amazing.
That's
on
awesome.
NICOT 30, and another 40 in process that we're waiting. And now they're starting to come out on actual important age-related disease states like Parkinson's disease, and we're seeing positive results.
Definitely. It's just for the listeners and viewers, the idea behind a true study is we work past safety first and then move to efficacy. So that's why, listen, this is, as you said, Rob, this is 10 years in the process, safety profile done, now it's efficacy. We're doing something similar with regenerative medicine, stem cell therapy, exosomes, and things like that, because we know we're beyond the safety aspect. Now we're looking at efficacy. It's interesting. I've got a couple follow-up questions. If we look at nicotinamide riboside, this ingredient is at the top of the food chain. Now, there are some scientists, I won't name any right now, but I think you have an idea, that say that NMN is a more effective precursor to NAD. Let's dispel that myth and tell me why nicotinamide riboside is the best ingredient out there.
Yeah, it's not even close. But, I've had the benefit of being able to work in numerous industries. You mentioned the entertainment industry. I've a few others as well. One thing you notice is that one thing every industry has in common is people. And when there's some element of success, people will jump in. And sometimes they'll do it scrupulously and sometimes unscrupulously to compete. There are people, if you were to form a new town, a new village, one of the first things you would do is form a police force.
Mm-hmm.
Something about us.
Yeah.
That we have a tendency to misstate the truth or take. The best business in the world is thievery because it has no
Yeah.
cost of goods. There's no cost of goods.
All the upside.
You said the key word by accident when you said nucleoside and nucleotide. The NMN is what they call a nucleotide, meaning there's a phosphate attached to the circumference, to the perimeter. That phosphate prevents NMN from penetrating cells. And in order for NMN to have an impact on NAD levels, it needs to convert, it needs to break down. And what we have shown is that if you take NMN, it tries to get into the cell, it fails to get into the cell, that creates friction and inflammation. But as it floats through the bloodstream, it eventually falls apart and breaks apart. And what's left is a small amount of nicotinamide riboside, Niagen. That then will enter the cell and create a lower level of elevation of NAD. So it will work.
And that's interesting. That's the same reason why for everyone getting IV NAD therapy, the same thing occurs. Although at much higher concentrations, you still will create that initial inflammation, and then it has to be broken down in order to be absorbed into the cell.
Yeah, no, NAD has the same problem as NMN, but much worse because the NAD molecule also has the problem of being a very large molecule. So there are people that get this NAD IV treatment and will swear by it, frankly. Now, but what happens with people who get NAD IV treatment is they'll get a gram, say, of NAD in an IV, and it could take 3.5, sometimes 4 hours for that full gram to make its way into the body. And if you know anyone that's done it, although they love it because afterwards they have an incredible feeling of elation and it's
Energy
therapeutic,
rush.
they sweat, they have nausea, and these side effects from NAD, and the reason it takes so long is because NAD can't get up into the cell. So what happens is it breaks down, and the key thing it breaks down into is what we call Niagen or NR or nicotinamide riboside, and then it has an elevation. Now, if you were able to do NR through an IV, you would have significantly higher levels of NAD in the cells, and you could probably get a full gram in maybe a half an hour with no side effects.
But you wouldn't have a stable molecule to deliver.
No, I
Okay.
think you could, NR would work via IV or injection in the way that NAD would dream of, because NR is a nucleoside. It doesn't have that phosphate problem that both NMN and NAD has. The other interesting thing about NR or Tru Niagen is Dr. Brenner, the Dartmouth guy, his research shows that interestingly, NR goes to the distress cells. So there's a pathway that he patented called the NR kinase pathway. The cell opens up a pathway, literally looking for nicotinamide riboside or Niagen, call for help when it is under stress. So it's not just that taking Tru Niagen elevates NAD levels across your body, but specifically it focuses on those cells that are under stress. Which is why I think, for example, if somebody goes in for some sort of cosmetic surgery or treatment, the healing process,
Definitely.
they should take high levels of Tru Niagen in conjunction. They should actually probably start right before the surgery and then maintain high levels for at least a couple of weeks afterwards, because that healing process is something that is challenging for some people.
Sure, stresses the cells for sure.
Most people are going to ask you, is there a downside to it? What are the downsides to taking this? What are the downsides? Like, I think it's a brilliant idea to do this before an operation, regardless of what operation you're having. I think it'll make you heal better. But the question is, everyone wants to know, obviously, wow, this is amazing. Everyone should take it. What is the downside? Are there any side effects? Have you seen anything that, or any type of person that shouldn't do this?
There are some doctors who tell people not to do it. We've done very exhaustive toxicology and safety tests. I mean, it's been 10 years in the making, and the majority of the tests are safety. The Parkinson's study that came out a month ago, they actually studied the safety of 3 grams a day it was just a month, but these Parkinson's patients that had, high levels of tremors took 3 grams a day for a month, and they showed a statistically significant decline in the major Parkinson's metric, which is something called MDS. It worked. But most importantly, it showed that it was safe. Most of the studies that have been out are on around 1 gram a day. Most people who take Tru Niagen only take 300 milligrams a day. So it's safe well beyond the dose that most people are taking. But if you did go through some sort of a surgical procedure, or you are trying to recover from something, it probably makes sense to take more. That's how I take it. Usually 600 milligrams a day. And then if I'm feeling something, I double it.
And for our listeners, because I think this is fascinating, explain to them that, most people are going to look at this and think, wow, this is the magic pill. I'm just going to take this and be able to do whatever else I want in my life. I know that you really do have like this whole kind of the 4 golden truths, and your mission statement is to, this is there as an adjunct, right, to other things. And I think that's as important as anything else, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you mentioned NMN, for example. Like what happened is people realized that elevating NAD levels safely is a very, very important thing. So a lot of writers and influencers and people such as yourselves heard about NAD, read about NAD, remember it when you were in medical school, and researched it and said, wow, this is a real deal thing, and it really declines with age. And if I simply elevate NAD, I could improve the way the body ages or the way the body heals. And then many companies piled in and said, we're on the bandwagon. Our product is better. We can sell it. We can do it. Now, none of those companies do any research. None of those companies have regulatory approvals around the world. None of those companies have patents. None of those companies actually develop the science. And if you look at the source of where it's made, and this is an interesting, maybe a separate conversation we could have about the dietary supplement business in general, which I've learned quite a bit about over the last few years. They're made in these factories. I mean, we sent a team to China and to India recently to see these factories that are making. It's not good.
Yeah,
I can only imagine.
It's not truly NMN.
Well, yeah, we also bought all the NMN on the market and tested it, and less than half had what was in the bottle, and many didn't have any NMN. I mean, the FDA has said NMN is illegal. They have banned it.
Absolutely.
But they did not follow proper procedures. But any company who's selling NMN today doesn't care.
Right.
Yeah. Well, if you look at Tru Niagen, obviously, from what I understand, that's patented technology. How is it different than an NR on the market? Let's say it is an approved lab where they do testing, and how is Tru Niagen different from that particular, molecule or how ingredient, active, we'll say?
We are aware of no NR on the market that does not infringe on our patents.
That's a great thing to throw out there. Again, for all the listeners and viewers, remember, you have to, we take things as is, and it's not necessarily the case. You have to make sure that what you're actually putting in your body is what it's being sold as. And this should tell you right now that if you're looking for NAD supplementation, that Tru Niagen is going to be your only option, the only real option.
Companies that we consider honorable companies that don't make false claims, that are careful in their bottling and marketing and production, to whom we supply Niagen. So if the bottle says Niagen, they got it from us, and that's okay.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned, listen, we go back and forth about the FDA and what's necessary. When we're looking at supplementation, obviously there's really no FDA guidance in that. And that's why you had alluded to earlier, we could have a whole separate discussion on the supplement business, because it's really the Wild West. But is there any talk of the FDA scaling back on this? I know NMN was removed from the market because now we're seeing such amazing results that they're saying, wait a sec, should this be an investigational drug as an IND as opposed to a supplement? Is there any talk or chatter of this? Or because you've had so much research, it doesn't even matter because you could potentially continue as is?
Well, the FDA hasn't taken Tru Niagen off the market. They took NMN off the market.
Yeah, definitely. No, definitely.
And Tru Niagen works better than NMN for the reasons I explained anyway. It's just that the people selling NMN are doing so because they can, and they're making money. And until the FDA, goes after them in a very aggressive way, and they either have to pay a fine or go to jail or something, some of these guys are going to keep selling it. and try to persuade us that we should keep doing it. Your larger question about the dietary supplement industry in general is an interesting one. The industry has grown very significantly since 1994, when the key law that defines the dietary supplement product, called DSHEA, was passed. And it's grown from what then was about a $4 billion industry to now a $60 billion industry. And it's grown with very, very few innovative ingredients. What you're seeing is a proliferation of many companies entering the market. The entry barriers are low because of the internet. You don't have to get into retail. People create ads. You see them on social media. They're false. They'll put them up there until the FTC comes after them. The novel ingredients, the new innovations, have really gone to the pharmaceutical drug business, not dietary supplements. So when you watch television and you see a attractive model with a stethoscope around their neck touting some amazing discovery, it's not an amazing discovery. Either a reformulation or a narrative of some sort, but it's not actual science going on here.
Sure.
And I think that that's something that the FDA needs to work on. These dietary supplement companies have become basically consumer products companies. They're basically selling chocolate bars, just basically marketing at this point, but there's not enough real science. So if you are a real science company like a ChromaDex, you actually operate at an odd disadvantage.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because all the money we spend on all this research and these patents and protecting these patents and getting regulatory approvals country by country, and then other companies will come in and say, hey, we elevate NAD too. And
That's for
sell it
sure.
online. So they don't have the expenses.
We look at it very similarly
It's to what we do for a living.
We do, believe it or not, as board-certified plastic surgeons who have gone through the rigorous training and testing and board certification, as opposed to giving Botox at Earth Bar. It's going to happen. It's hard to regulate those. If we look at the market, what are your thoughts on those companies that are GMO certified? Let's say they have some third-party governing body. We don't even know who made that up, but this third-party governing institution that goes through and actually tests the products and does things like that. So if someone were to find, something that's GMO certified, what are your thoughts on that? Coming from someone who's really got a research oriented background with these products, I'm just curious.
I think some of them are legitimate. I think some of these GMO certified facilities really go to the trouble of making sure that they are adherent and that they're safe.
But it's a small percent.
Yeah, especially if you go outside the US, you have a risk. Like, we don't ask, where was it made?
Yeah, you're right.
We don't ask the question, who made it? Where was it made? How is it made? Is it certified? Who looked at it? We don't ask these questions. We just simply buy it. And we actually swallow it.
Now, let's just go back to Tru Niagen. I mean, for our listeners, because we're in this world of America where everything is about instant gratification and wanting to see. So I want to take this and I want to know, number one, how long do I have to take it for? Is this something I need to take for the rest of my life? And number two, how am I going to know it's doing anything for me? Am I going to feel it? Am I going to feel more energy? And obviously, the one thing that we really haven't hit on is this is not just the magic pill. You have to have a healthy lifestyle and eat properly and exercise and get sleep and all the other good stuff. But I'm just going to open it up to you because I'm curious for myself and for our listeners as well.
Yeah, those are great questions. And
Thank
we
you.
spend a lot of time discussing that internally and making sure that we do not overrepresent or overpromise. We know what it does and we understand mechanistically how it does it. So you want to create expectations that are realistic. And if you're just simply taking Tru Niagen and you're not addressing the rest of your life, you're likely to be disappointed.
Great point.
However, it does work and it does a number of things. And I try to stay away from the word feel. And although that's what everybody says, will I feel a difference? And the reason why I try to stay away from the word feel is because there are other things like coffee that are a stimulant or hormones, which will affect the way you feel, but aren't necessarily doing much. They're not therapeutic. They're not actually helping the body. So energy Like you could eat a Snickers bar or drink a cup of coffee and you might feel more energy. And in the case of the Snickers bar, it will actually create some more energy in the short term. But in terms of actual long-term energy, we have a study. Actually, there was a study that got published this morning that shows an increase in muscle mitochondrial biogenesis. In other words, if you took a human clinical published peer-reviewed study that shows that by taking Tru Niagen, we increase the number of mitochondria, mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria in muscle cells. So you have more mitochondria, you have more ATP yield per mitochondria. So overall, you have more energy, but you may or may not feel that. So what I recommend is that you, before you start taking it, make note of the things in your body that used to work better. Like sleep, it could be sleep. It could be that you have some pain in a joint, in a shoulder, or elbow, or something like that. It could be that it seems like I keep forgetting where I put my wallet, and that seems to be happening more as, any one of these metrics. Or it seems like my workout levels have gone down, or my recovery, like I feel sore a little longer. Whatever those metrics are for each person, write it down, make a note of it, try to quantify it. Then take Tru Niagen for 2 months, and then go back and look at and then quantify it again. That's where you will see improvement.
Listen, that subjective data is real. It may not be a double-blinded randomized controlled trial, but in some of these things where you're looking at an endpoint that is hard to determine because there are so many variables, that subjective data can be real. We do the same thing with regenerative medicine. We look at certain data. Now, we also look at laboratory blood values and things like that, but really some of the most powerful data is how people feel afterwards, but it's based off of what you're saying. It's not this euphoric feeling. It's that they notice better sleep, increased sexual function, less aches and pains. And so, I agree with you. I think when people hear NAD, it's how much energy am I going to feel? But what they don't realize is the cellular rebuild, when all of the chronic damage that's occurred, that it's actually happening, on the inside without you having this euphoric feeling. So it's truly remarkable.
We've done surveys, and 2/3 of the people do say they feel it. They feel different.
So that's very important.
And you also asked, like, how long do I take it? And what our data shows is that we can show a measurable increase of NAD levels within 2 hours of taking Tru Niagen, 2 hours. We also show that if let's say you take one capsule a day, that's 300 milligrams per day. And that's what most people do, 300 milligrams a day. Most of us who read the science take more than that, but that's what most people do, 300 milligrams a day. So what we've shown is that within 2 hours, if I give you a blood test right now, and then I give you a blood and you take it, and then I give you a blood test 2 hours later, I already show an increase of NAD levels in those red blood cells. But it continues to go up at 300 milligrams a day for 2 weeks, and then it plateaus. But if you stop taking it, it starts to decline again. So the way I think about it is when you take it and how much you take it should be a function of a couple of things. One is, how do you feel? And two, how old you are. Like whenever I meet, like my father-in-law, I urge him to take a lot and every day. He's in his 80s.
And it was interesting that you had mentioned this before, that some physicians tell you not to use it. It's my physician, I go through Human Longevity Institute, and they do a lot of functional medicine as well, but they had said, maybe reduce it from 7 days a week to 3 days a week. But I didn't understand the reasoning behind that. So I still take it on a daily basis. I take a gram a day. And every now and then, just like any other supplement, I take a little bit of a holiday for maybe 5 days and then reset. Now, is there any scientific basis behind that? No, but the body finds an amazing way around so many different supplements that we take. So that was my thought process. But let's say you're talking to average viewer out there and that they should be taking more than 300 milligrams a day. So let's say your recommendations would be take a gram a day, 7 days a week. And then what is the average cost for someone because we have to, plug this into our monthly budget. What's the average cost? I'm taking 1,000 milligrams or 1 gram a day for 30 days.
That would be about $3 a day. 300 milligrams is about $1 a day.
It's nothing.
Awesome.
Really, if you think about it,
the upside is so.
it's less than your Starbucks.
Yep.
Far less. So how about this? So starting today, I'm going to write down what's bothering me. And I'm going to take it every day. And in 2 months, I'm going to give you a call. Just me and you. No, because I will say, and I've tried NMN and I've tried the other stuff, and I haven't been overly, it hasn't done a whole lot for me. But I do think that, first of all, looking at all of your scientific advisory board and the amount of real scientists you have that are running your company and really are doing all of your R&D. Like you said, it's an R&D company. It's fascinating to me. And whoever's listening, I think this is the type of supplement that you really should put money towards, instead of all the other stuff that people are selling you and thinking, oh, you're going to take this, you're going to feel. This is legit. We've got the founder. Basically, it's sitting here talking to us, telling us that he takes it, he gives it to his relatives. These are things to me that are big, indicators of, hey, this stuff works. Give it a shot. Now, again, guys, don't think of this as the magic pill. No, there is no magic pill in the world, but this is something that can really, really help with health, wellness, and longevity, and just an overall feeling of just, energized. And I think a lot of people in this world don't have that. They're lacking energy. So that's why people run and get coffee, or they go and get IVs and go and do all these things because they think that that's going to help them. Well, I think if you combine, healthy lifestyle, exercise, and, go to have Tru Niagen, I think that'll be great.
Alcohol, reduce sun exposure, all things we know, but sometimes it's difficult to do. But add this to the mix, and I think you're going to see.
And this is bought online, or can you go into a physician's store? Or tell us about really the best way to get our hands on some Tru Niagen, please.
We basically just sell it on Amazon and on our website, but there are a few hundred physicians and healthcare practitioners that sell it. Also, there are a few retailers, but very, very few. It's mostly specialty retailers that call us. Outside the U.S., it is available in retail, particularly in Asia, but in the U.S., it's basically an online business.
And I really love your idea of treating our patients. All of our patients are very healthy because they're having elective cosmetic surgery, but why not try to pre-treat them and post-treat them with Tru Niagen? And you never know, they may heal faster, there'll be less inflammation. I think this is something that we're gonna start putting on our shelf and promoting, because I think it's a great idea.
We'll say for pre-op, give them a 3-gram loading dose, for 2 days, and then at least have them take a gram post-op, just because they're in that cycle. The cells are stressed. Definitely
go big or go home.
Also, dentists and orthodontists, like any kind of surgery, like we know that it goes right to the distressed cell. So it makes perfect sense. We have some amazing studies on published human clinical studies on disease states that you can't, because we're not a drug, we're not allowed to promote. And some results on like fertility, egg cells age. Amazing fertility doctors that have told us some extraordinary stories, because elevate NAD, those cells are stronger, healthier, stronger cells as well.
And it's much easier than doing in vitro or anything like that. So it's really worth giving it a shot. I mean, if you're having a hard time getting pregnant and experiencing infertility, this is a no-brainer. Why not try it if worst case scenario it makes the rest of your body feel good?
Looking at the future, obviously for Tru Niagen, you said there's 40 additional studies that are currently undergoing their research. What's in the future for ChromaDex?
Well, we're really interested in you mentioned Botox, and we know about NAD IV. And we know why people have such a hard time with NAD IV. So we're interested in this area for Niagen of, low dose injections or IV drips.
Wow.
Because it would bypass the gut and bypass the liver. And
the liver, sure.
So we think that that's a really exciting area. But anything we do, we go through exhaustive research and FDA approvals and safety studies, and you know that, and so we that's an area of particular interest to us. The skin area is a particularly interesting area to us because we know that niacinamide is an important ingredient in topical products, so we know we're better than niacinamide, which has similarities. Niacinamide is also called nicotinamide. Nicotinamide riboside is basically that on, a very, very stronger version of that. They're both vitamin B3s, for example. That area is of interest to us. We would be interested in the energy drink area, but nicotinamide riboside is very susceptible to water. So we haven't scientifically been able to figure out how to put it in liquid.
It's a great idea.
It breaks apart. It breaks apart. The nicotinamide and the ribose separate when exposed to water. So we haven't quite figured that out yet. And then, of course, drugs. I mean, I mentioned Parkinson's disease, and there are several other diseases. There's an orphan disease called Cockayne syndrome, where children age so rapidly that they die of old age by the time they're 12, 13 years old.
Like the progeria.
Yeah, that as well. And there are
Yes.
4 or 5 of these things: ataxia, Waldorf's, progeria. And we have great data, human clinical data on ataxia, and great mouse data on Cockayne's that shows that Tru Niagen works for these kids.
Wow.
That's fascinating.
So that would be a drug pursuit potentially down the road. So there are a lot of opportunities for us with this molecule in the research we're doing. And we also have many other molecules that we've developed and have controlled and patented that we think would be the next generation version of Tru Niagen. So there's a lot going on here.
If you like this video, you're going to love this one.
The dead giveaway of your age for everyone. John can do a facelift on a lady that's 75, make her look 50. But if the hands don't get rejuvenated, dead giveaway their age.